recording. And I will share one more thing before I hand it over to Laura, and that is one of the things that I'm really passionate about is our specialist councils in Alberta. And so you may or may not know this, but in Alberta, we've got 21 different specialist councils that focus on really key areas of education within our province. And these are run by volunteers across the province who are active teachers in our province as well. And so what that allows us to do is create these groups of people who are passionate about similar things and being able to get those people together. Now, as an active ATA member, so if you teach or substitute teach in a public, separate, or francophone school, you are entitled to join one specialist council for free, and you can change your free membership as much as you would like, but you're allowed to join one specialist council for free. If you're here and you really like what you see today, I know Laura is actively involved with the Fine Arts Council, so you can see that right here, and that would be a great choice for you to be able to take a look at for your free membership. So before I hand it over to Laura, I would love to just show you quickly on how you can join your take advantage of that free membership. So if you visit the website teachers.ab.ca, that brings you to your association homepage. Now, when you do that, on the top right corner, there will be this button that says log in. I've already logged in just to save us some time. But once you've logged in and you scroll down, you're going to see your ATA tools. And on here is really, once you've logged in, really great information for you. So there's information about your local, there's information about your provincial association and any of your groups that you're a part of. So to join a council, you would just come down to tools and you'd hit specialist council membership. Once you click your specialist council membership, you can click to get a membership in a specialist council. If you don't already have one, under the I want to, it will say get or join my no cost membership. If you already have one, so this is, I'll be honest, this is my wife's account because I can't log in as a staff member. So this is my wife's account. But I could change her no-cost membership today, and I could change it to Fine Arts Council today, or I could change it to whomever I would like today. And so if you're interested in fine arts, something that is one of your passions, I would really encourage you to join the Fine Arts Council and see how you can get plugged in and connected with that group of teachers. I have had a chance to connect with them on a number of occasions, and they are very passionate about the arts without question. So it's a great group of people to connect with. With that being said, I know for a fact you're not here to listen to me or to hear about specialist councils, but you came because you're interested in what Laura is going to share with you. So at this point, I would love to hand it over to Laura. Laura, thank you so much for joining us and for volunteering your time here and your expertise to share with us today. So I will pass it over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much, Chris. I'm really happy to be here and hope that what I have found valuable and I'm sharing with you, you will value in the same way. I've taken a bit of liberty to write a few things down. So if you see me glancing at the paper, it's because I've now videotaped myself, or videotape, that's funny, filmed myself through video to show to my students enough that I'm really aware of my tics. I say a lot and pause a ton. So it bugs me and I have to just read what I've written. I think we can all relate. So first of all, I am involved in the Fine Arts Specialist Council as the art representative for the province. So I will fire off a message monthly on our Fine Arts mail out, often listing new art lessons or what's available in the province for PD. So I encourage you later, if you're interested, engage with me and you can find out how to get that information. I've been teaching for over 25 years and primarily art over the course of that. In fact, there were only 3 years where I decided maybe I should try teaching something different, and I felt like my right arm was cut off. So here I am back teaching art again and loving it. Now I'm gonna stop saying and read. I've primarily taught in high schools and junior highs all around Alberta, actually. So if anyone knows where Lacrete, Alberta is, or Drayton Valley, or around Daysland, which is around Camrose, that's where I cut my teeth because primarily I had a lot of family that pioneered in Alberta, and I fell in love with rural Alberta. And I will later return to my rural roots, but the jobs were in Edmonton and Calgary, and that's where I did the majority of my work. And I'm currently in Calgary now, 16 years later. I've taught face-to-face and virtually before COVID made us have to teach virtually. I was teaching online, and I was teaching art online as well to high school students. I studied at the U of A, majoring in art education and taking extra fine arts courses, but I couldn't do 2 degrees at once, and I had to go to the degree that paid the money. So I'm in education and have been loving it. Haven't looked back. It's very good. And this brings me to you today. So this professional development session is about sculpting. Sculpting seems expensive and intangible when you're thinking of kilns and glazing and teaching from home. However, I discovered an artist's grade solution to this problem, and one that is well suited to learning from home. It is called Cold Porcelain, and it's an air dry clay of choice and can be created with simple household ingredients: cornstarch, glue, a little bit of baby oil, and a little bit of lemon. And its consistency is remarkable. There's a reason why this is one of the top air dry clays that artists like to use. It dries to a hard consistency of a sturdy plastic toy, but it's very pliable before it's cured. Acrylic paint can be applied after the sculpting's done, or you can put the acrylic paint actually right into the wet clay and tint it or saturate it with color. More about its preparation and application will be addressed later. Right now, I'm going to launch into a bit of a sculpture history lesson because part of our existing curriculum deals with what they label as encounters. So drawing, composition, and encounters is how our curriculum is divided, but encounters deals with the sources of the images, transformations through time, and the impact of those images on culture. It's a third of our curriculum, but it's hard to teach if you don't know your way around our history. So I hope you can use this video that I've created. It's available to you. This little video is a brief history of sculpture. It not only addresses how people encounter sculpture, but it touches on how artists have, through the history of humanity, used the elements and principles of design. So I'll take you to that first. Allow me to share my screen. I just have to make sure the computer sound is shared. Good. And here we go. I'll make it full screen. Hopefully it comes. Looks like everybody can see it.
If it is from my own home. For those of you...
Sorry, let's start from the beginning.
Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to teach you art, even if it is from my own home. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Laura Mulvey, and I normally teach art at St. Helena's School. Today, we're going to learn about sculpture, a brief history. So this is a very brief history of sculpture, probably as brief a history as you're going to get, I believe, considering it fits onto one page, and we're beginning as early as 35,000 BC. So we'll start with the Lion Man of Hohensteinstadel. It was found in Germany. Its name is German Lohenmensch, means lion human. This lion-headed figurine is the oldest known animal-shaped sculpture in the world, and is the oldest known uncontested example of figurative art. It was supposed to be carved out of mammoth ivory using a flintstone knife. The figurine stands approximately 31 centimeters tall, 5.5 centimeters wide, and 6 centimeters approximately thick. A good while later, around about 2500 BC, we encounter a monumental period of sculpture in ancient Egypt. This time, pharaohs proclaimed themselves as gods. They believed it, and so everyone else did. And so all the art of the time was dedicated to the gods, the deities of the time, the pharaohs. The Great Sphinx of Giza is a colossal limestone statue of a recumbent sphinx located in Giza, Egypt. It depicts the face of King Khafre, the pharaoh of the time. It's one of Egypt's most famous landmarks. It measures 73 meters long and 20 meters high, featuring a lion's body and a human head adorned with a royal headdress. This statue was supposedly carved from a single piece of limestone. According to some estimates, it would have taken about 3 years for 100 workers using stone hammers and copper chisels to finish the statue. Talk about a seriously large group project. During ancient Greece's Hellenistic period, which was about 323 BCE to 31 CE, Much like the art of Egyptians, there was little distinction between the sacred and the secular. The Greek gods were thought to have human form. So the human form was considered to be the most important subject in Greek art. This period was renowned for expressive figures that appear to be in motion and saw the creation of three of the world's most famous marble sculptures. These are the Venus de Milo, the Winged Victory of Samothrace, which appears in the next slide, and Laocoon and his sons. So in true Hellenistic fashion, Laocoon and his sons showcases an interest in the realistic depiction of movement. It's sculpted from a single block of marble, the main figure as well as the children and the serpents. The image on the right is only a detail of the marble statue. Here we have the Colosseum of Constantine. So it came in with the rise of Christianity, and here marks a division from the Egyptians and the Greeks, as now a man, not a god, was being honored through art. The Colossus of Constantine was created in honor of the late Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, who, upon converting to Christianity, was the leader of the first Roman Christian Empire. Portions of this Colossus are all that remain. The great head, arms, and legs of the Colossus were carved from white marble, while the rest of the body consisted of a brick core and wooden framework that was possibly covered with gilded bronze. So judging by the size of the remaining pieces, the seated and throned figure would have been about 12 meters high. The head is about 2.5 meters, and each foot measures over 2 meters long. So if you look at the bottom picture to the right, you can see the size of the woman compared to the size of the foot, and it is quite imposing. So here we have a gargoyle on top of Notre Dame Cathedral, Paris. During the medieval era, around the 13th century, cathedrals marked the center of Christian communities, and these were architectural homages dedicated to God, not a human ruler. So we've gone away from depicting humans for humans' sake, and now it's all about sculpture for God. And these cathedrals were adorned with some of the history's most beautiful sculptures of angels and saints. However, there were these grotesque figures that decorated the alcoves and looked out over the cities. The Gothic idea of a damned afterlife is one of pain and suffering, and the gargoyles can be said to represent the demons outside versus the sanctity and safety of the church inside. Here is one of my favorites, Michelangelo's Pietà. The Renaissance continued with art to honor God. It also, however, revived ideas about humanism found in the Hellenistic period. Remember the Greek sculptures. The perfected human figure of the ancient Greeks seems to reappear again over 1,500 years later, which was evidence that artists began to show more interest in a scientific approach to reality. One of the most famous artists of this period, and of all time for that matter, was Michelangelo. A genius and true Renaissance man, one of Michelangelo's first sculptures was the Madonna and Child. He completed this when he was only 16 years old. In 1497, he was commissioned to carve a Pietà showing the Virgin Mary grieving over the body of her deceased son, completed when he was only 24 years old. This is the only work of art that Michelangelo ever signed, and he did so after overhearing the viewers attribute his masterpiece to other artists. So when no one was around, he snuck into the building and carved. Michelangelo made this on the sash of the Virgin Mary. That was so funny. The thinker appears during the 19th and 20th centuries. This is where the art world reflected the rapid-fire changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution. Instead of focusing on perfect anatomy, details, and storytelling, artists began to pay more attention to what they perceived below the surface. So personal expression and style took on greater importance in creating a truer rendition of reality. Auguste Rodin is one of the more famous of the sculptors of the time and is considered the father of modern sculpture. His masterpiece, The Thinker, represents Dante, who's the author of the Divine Comedy, leaning forward to observe the circles of hell while meditating on his work. The sculpture was initially both a being with a tortured body, almost a damned soul, and a free-thinking man, determined to transcend his suffering through poetry. Here we have The Head of a Woman by Pablo Picasso. So a variety of art movements occurred during the modernist movement of the 20th century, the early 20th century. You had Cubism, Dadaism, Surrealism, pop art, minimalism, and Futurism, and they all came about during this period. So This happened after World War I, where artists were expressing the frustration of the violence and chaos of the times. Although most famous as a painter, Pablo Picasso did also produce some sculptural pieces. In fact, his mixed media sculptures were especially influential in the beginning of the 20th century. These early sculpture creations they used a variety of unlikely objects, including cardboard, bike seats, plywood, tree branches, and other things. So art is life. If humankind was sculpting as early as 35,000 BC, it's safe to say that art is and has been substantially significant to civilization. Nike of Samothrace, also known as the Winged Victory of Samothrace, dates as early as the 3rd and the 1st century BC. It stands center stage at the Department of Greek, Etruscan, and Roman Antiquities in the Louvre. I'm just astounded by the detail that shows the musculature underneath the billowing drapery, and is carved out of stone. Just think, this was crafted with the technology and knowledge that was available over 2,000 years ago. What is sculpture? So traditionally, sculpture prior to the 20th century had 4 main defining characteristics. First, it was the only 3-dimensional art form. Second, it was representational, meaning it looked like what artists saw. Third, it was viewed as an art of solid form. And fourth, traditional sculptures used only 2 main techniques, carving or modeling. However, sculpture takes on a far wider definition today. It can be frequently wholly abstract. It may reference empty space in an important way. It can also be kinetic and capable of movement. Finally, as well as being carved or modeled, it can be assembled, glued, projected holographically, think of light shows, or constructed in a wide variety of ways. The elements of art and principles of design are included in sculpture like all other art. The elements of art are the building blocks used by artists to create a work of art. So these are line, shape, color, volume, form, texture, space. The principles of design describe the ways that artists use the elements of art in a work of art. These are balance, pattern, rhythm, emphasis, repetition, variety, movement, proportion, unity. Remember the Winged Victory of Samothrace? Just like the other famous Greek masterpieces, all showed figures in motion. They exemplified the principle of movement. Rodin's thinker used the principle of emphasis to show the anguish of the figure. The lines of his bent back and hanging head all emphasized a heavy downward direction. This helped show the viewers how the figure was weighed down with heavy thoughts. Now that we've been introduced to the how and why of historical sculpting, it's time to do our own. I've started by creating a little surreal fish. Remember, surrealism was mentioned as a modern art movement. It creates fantastical images by placing objects next to each other that aren't commonly found together. Here, I show a fish submerged in a tabletop. So what are some of the elements and principles that I used to make this? Movement, the tail looks as though it's fluttering. Balance, the head points up in one direction while the tail points diagonally in the opposite direction. Rhythm, the tail rolls up, down, and up again, mimicking waves. The elements I used were texture. You can see the scales on the body and ridges in the tail and the fins. I used volume. There's actual volume where I created in the round forms of the fish's head and the body, and the flat forms are found in the tail and fins. But then there's an implied volume, which is created in the illusion of what's submerged in whatever surface I sit it on. What will you create? Using cold porcelain, choose a subject to sculpt. Your artist's prompt is below the surface. I chose below the surface as the artist prompt because the 19th century artists wanted to have their audiences imagine more than what was seen. My tabletop goldfish has viewers imagine the submerged part of the fish. Start by brainstorming at least 10 words that come to mind when you think of the phrase below the surface. Let all your ideas flow and choose your best. Then when creating your sculpture, you must use at least 5 of the elements and principles in any combination. You'll see these elements and principles I listed for you are on the right-hand side of the slide. In the lessons that are included on D2L, you'll find a recipe for cold porcelain and instructions for techniques you'll need to learn to build your work. I look forward to seeing what you create.
Thank you for listening to that. I hope you enjoyed that part of it. I am going to jump into how to make cold porcelain, how to use cold porcelain. Perhaps, is that okay, Chris, if I, oh, oh, sorry, that is my video. Skip ads, let's stop. Sorry about that. Oh boy, back to, if I don't stop the video, it keeps playing. So sorry for that.
Not a problem. We actually didn't hear it because you stopped the share.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Yay, that solves that problem. So I'm going to jump into how to make cold porcelain, what you can create with it. And then if you have other questions, I think we are going to save those for the end. Is that okay?
Sure.
If I do that? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to share my screen again after I tell you about the lesson. The lesson deals with components after you teach history. Deals with components, which is dealing with the properties of air-dried clay. So I'm going to show you. There's a list of tips for how to sculpt with air-dried clay. Relationships, so I'm going to talk about the vocabulary we use. You heard me mention it in the video about the elements and principles of art and design, and that's used across the board in all art and design. And kids can describe their work and others' work this way, and then the organization, how we use those elements and principles. So I would like to introduce you to a course that is created, I'm building at our school on D2L. That's our platform, our sharing platform. It is an extracurricular course. And we did this because our options aren't mandated to be taught anymore. And if our option teachers were all trying at once and phys ed teachers to access kids, we would inundate their families who are still struggling right now to keep up with all the work that's coming to the course. But instead, we've all packed it into one course, and this seems to be effective and people are using it. So let me share my screen with you. Okay. But I don't want you to look at Stephen Colbert. I want you to look at something else. Here's my course. Okay. So yes, I can see that you see it. We call this the extracurricular course, and on the news page, I will list what's coming ahead. I talk about the interview that I will be having with this artist on the weekend, or on Friday this week, but I'd like to take you to the actual sculptural part of this. So I'm going to click on resources and take you to the content. Oops, here we go. And there you'll find sculpting. So here are the 3 ingredients, or the few ingredients that you'll need. There's 4 actually. 1 cup of cornstarch, 1 cup of white or clear glue, 2 tablespoons of baby oil, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Lotion is optional, but I highly advise it because when you're kneading, this is a very sticky process, and lotion helps to eliminate that problem. So this is what you can sculpt with cold porcelain. And I'll show it to you on the full screen here. Oops. So I was used to sculpting with clay, and I wasn't expecting this to be quite as different as it actually is. Let's see, I'm not sure you can see that full screen because it doesn't show. Oh, hang on, I think I have to exit out of this. Forgive me.
Laura, you can hit the button that is the green button that says new share now on your screen.
Okay, good, there we are.
New share.
Thanks.
Use that new screen that popped up.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent, now you can see this. Thank you. That was one thing I hadn't had to use before. That's great, Chris. So I wasn't used to sculpting with, well, I was used to sculpting with clay, and I wasn't expecting this to be quite so different, but I quickly realized that rather than building what I used to with ceramics, I would have to imagine what I could create that would have the feel of a plastic toy. And this is not a flimsy plastic when it dries. It's a hard, durable plastic. So I created this surreal fish that I had shown you earlier. My daughter was curious and she needed a break from her homework. She's in grade 8 and she decided to dive in and sculpt as well. She's not an art student. She's a band student, with my heart, but you know, Just kidding. But yeah, so she doesn't really immerse herself in doing art a lot, but she pulled off something that was quite nice. This is the little octopus. And what I thought was the medium is so intuitive and familiar that kids who may be afraid of doing art are not necessarily afraid of working with this. So one of the early assignments I would do when I would teach ceramics to introduce how to work with ceramics was to make a spoon holder out of children's hands. And I still needed to replace the ceramic spoon holder that I broke. I made 3 and broke them all. Ceramics are brittle and so not as durable as I'd like. I hate leaving my stovetop messy, so I still needed another spoon holder. But could I live with a dish that felt like a polymer rather than a ceramic? And the answer is yes. I've now sealed it with an acrylic and painted it, and I'll show you what that looks like after. So I'll move to this screen. I've talked about the lesson. This is a review of the lesson. So the prompt for art is creating something that comes to mind from below the surface when I list that phrase. So I wanted artists to imagine more than what was seen. So I did the tabletop goldfish so that you can imagine what is under the table rather than it actually being there. I have students start by brainstorming at least 10 words that come to mind when they think of the phrase below the surface, and I let all their ideas flow, telling them don't stop yourself, it's brainstorming. Then I have them pull out their sketchbook or paper that's available, and I begin to have them sketch their ideas. When they create their sculpture, I instruct them on using at least 5 of the elements and principles listed below in any combination. Do-it-yourself sculpting tools. So you do not have to have formal tools at hand. There's some great alternatives. An old gift card can slice clay just as well as the little metal, I think it's a brayer, I'm not sure. But it's a little metal kidney bean and it slices just very well. But an old gift card works just as well. Duct tape, skewers, pencils, rather sticks, wire, pliers, any pins like for sewing or push pins, sponges, foil, whatever else you can stick into the piece of clay works. And so I'm going to stop sharing that. And I'm going to take you to the site now that shows the recipe on how to make cold porcelain. I'll continue to share this. This site should also be shared with you. It is very, very simple. There's the ingredients again. I used the microwave. I found it very simply. So you put your ingredients into the bowl, stir them up, and microwave them for 15 seconds at a time, continuing to stir intermittently. And you do this about 9 times and it is cooked. Another way to, oh, and there they show, when it's time to knead it, you want to put lotion on your hands. I'll show you a little demo of what this looks like so you can actually see the consistency. I find that's really important because I've had staff members try this at home with their kids and they took pictures and showed me their very sticky hands and were laughing, and I said, just put some lotion on your hands. It turns into something that looks like clay. And so there's that. Then you wrap it in an airtight bag. I will show you the consistency of it after, but you can also use a stovetop. So there's 2 ways to cook it, and then they show you how to sculpt with it after. This is a great site to use. I'm now going to take you to how to make cold porcelain. Give me one moment.
I've cooked my porcelain.
And I'm going to do a new share. Okay.
And I wanted to show you the consistency.
Mobile popped over this wireless battery bank for an unboxing. Let's check this thing out.
Sorry about this. It's not what I wanted to do. Making cold porcelain. My videos. Let's try this again. Back to this. There we go.
And I wanted to show you the consistency you're looking for.
Good.
You're looking for something that looks like that. That's me. This is a sticky process, but what I really like about this when it's done is how, oh, this is much better, is how like a polymer it is. Now, do be careful because when you're kneading it, it is, and it's just come out of the microwave, it is hotter in the middle than it is on the outside. So you, for example, as I push down, I really feel the heat in the center. So you want to let it sit for a bit. Okay. After you knead it, it should look like that. There's one more thing. To get a smooth, less sticky dough, apply hand cream to your hands, then continue to knead the dough. Making sure that the hand cream gets all the way through. And you will have a dough that is as smooth as silk.
Okay, now I just have to make sure nothing else is going to play. Okay, good. Thanks for bearing with all the glitches that have occurred, and I'm just going to show you one more thing. So this is my spoon holder. The light doesn't really show it very well, but I wanted you to see if you can hear how this sounds. It is very, very hard. It dries to a very solid plastic. I'm in love with it. I think it's very workable. Oh, there was another thing. There is a sheet that shows tips on how to work with it. So it talks about using an armature. It talks about tools that you use to cut into it. I'll show you that, and then that will be the end, and I'll answer all your questions. So let's look here. Okay, this is my last share for you. Good. So these are 9 cold porcelain tips. You prepare your clay correctly. So we've talked about that. It talks about preparing your surface. So using a piece of wax paper to work your clay. It's very sticky, so I prepare my surface with wax paper because it won't adhere to the porcelain. Choosing the right tools. Air drying clay is a versatile medium that can be used for a range of art and craft projects. Your tools will depend on the type of sculpture you want to create. Wooden tools are suitable for shaping and smoothing, while stainless steel tools are perfect for precise modeling, detailing, and removing clay. Many of our clay tools come with information about what each tool is suitable for. But, you know, as I said, you can use do-it-your-own clay tools. Talks about creating an armature for extra support. So this is one of our lesser known air dry claying tips, but it can save you a lot of frustration. Although air drying clay is strong, it's also quite heavy. So you need an armature for support, and it goes into talking about that. I highlight something important. When you're attaching pieces together, you wet both edges that will be attached and score them, make ridges or indentations, so they stick together like a Velcro. It talks about bulking larger works. So if you are going to make a larger work and you're going to make it solidly out of clay, it will take a very long time to dry. So they talk about making a bulk together, an armature in the middle, filling the internal spaces. And this is what it talks about there. You can preserve them properly for multiple sessions. So it means wrapping them in seal tight. They talk about Saran wrap, I like to use plastic bags. You can store the clay in an airtight container. I use Ziploc bags. And then you get ready to paint. That was a lot of information. Normally when I do an art session, we have time to work through together. So when I did a lesson last Friday with my class online, I had them prepare their air dry clay ahead of time and follow along with me. I would encourage you to do the same. Some didn't have it prepared and they just liked to watch me sculpt at the same time, but they had lots of questions and were interested. That concludes my lesson for today. I hope that you can use it. And if you have any questions of me, I'd like to hear them.
I'd like to start, actually, if that's okay.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
how did you seal it? So you were talking about your spoon that you, or the spoon holder that you created. And I understand the idea of acrylic paint, but then how do you seal it so that it becomes food safe or that you can actually put things on it and wash it afterwards?
Acrylic is a plastic. So like any other plastic, you can seal it. I wouldn't recommend eating out of this all the time, but to rest my spoon on it will do just fine. But I use a clear coat sealant. And that's what I use. I am not recommending that you make plates and cups, but this spoon rest is for when I'm cooking on the stove and just laying a spoon for a short period of time and then washing my spoon. It's not going into my mouth. Okay.
Thank you.
Good question, though.
Any other questions for Laura at all?
I have a question. This is Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks. So thank you for showing this. My daughter loves to sculpt, and she likes the bake stuff because she can add stuff. Like once it's baked, you can add stuff. So this stuff you can just score it and wet both sides and put them together once the one piece is dry. Is that right?
When it's dry, you don't score it and wet it and put it together. However, it's made of glue. So if you glue pieces together, it sticks like it's just one uniform piece. It's beautiful. Clay, once it's broken, it's very hard to make sure it looks like it's one piece again.
Okay.
This is not the case. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question was asked here, Laura. How long does this last and will it get moldy?
As far as this is my first foray into it. As far as what I've read, I have not read anything about it getting moldy. I've seen artists create little things that look like porcelain doll heads and they use it. Because it is glue, if you think about glue, it doesn't get moldy. It just turns into this plastic, but you're adding it to cornstarch. My best guess is that mold is not a concern, but that's my guess. I haven't used it long enough.
How long have you had your spoon holder?
Oh, I just created that this month, or a month and a half ago, because I was scrambling. What am I going to use for my sculpture lesson with kids at home? So this was a brand new foray into something for me.
Very cool. Any other questions at all here for Laura? You can either type them in or you can unmute your microphone and just speak up if you'd like. Angie, do you have another question?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you already said it, but I didn't hear it. Did you say how long it would last in the airtight bag? Like how long can you keep it?
So how long it lasts in the airtight bag? So if you can see this piece that I'm playing with, it's very pliable. It pulls off into a teardrop. That's how you know it's in good condition. I've had this batch for 2 weeks in a sealed Ziploc.
Oh.
And that's it. Yeah. And so it feels quite similar to what it did before I put it in.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Laura Lee asked a question. Can it be baked to speed up the drying time?
I guess you can experiment with that. The dry time it takes about 2 weeks for something as solid as my spoon holder. But if you're making something that is more translucent, the other thing I love about this is it can, if you roll it out really thinly, it can allow light to pass through and create something beautiful. So if you can imagine creating, I've had this idea where I create floral arrangement and put the little fairy lights inside. I thought that would look lovely, or putting something where you could catch the sunlight through it. If it's thin like that, it will take very, very little time. But a 2-week dry period for something as solid as my spoon holder is what I've discovered.
And then can, Vina asked the question, can you add glitters or sparkles to the dough itself?
Absolutely. So what I love about this, and I love teaching lessons that can apply from K to 12, because it is sophisticated enough that a grade 12 student could create a human figure, a portrait, whatnot, but it's also intuitive enough that a little kindergartner, or maybe not a preschooler, you don't want this in their mouth, although kids have eaten glue before and not died. You definitely don't want them to eat this. It's as intuitive as a kindergartner could use, and they could glitter it up and decorate it as they will. It's lovely.
And cleaning the dish afterwards that you made it in, is that a big chore?
You want to get it in water soaking right away, because you know what glue is like when it dries, and you're going to have to chip away at it if it dries. So you do want to get it in water. In the little video that I showed on preparation, I had little comments on the side talking about what you needed to have handy while you're preparing this, because, you know, I went through all the trouble of figuring it out first. So I had a sticky microwave door and things like that. So in the comments on the short video about preparation, I said, get a spoon with a plate so that it's handy for you so you can mix. And you don't have to touch the glue. Open the door, your hands are free of glue, you're stirring with the spoon goes back on the plate. But as soon as you're done using it, as soon as you're done using the bowl, you want your bowl to go in water with soap, warm water into the sink, so that you're not chipping away at it later. It will come off, it's not permanent glue, but it's easier if you soak it first.
Awesome, thank you. How much time does a sculptor have before it becomes a solid? So if I'm using with it in air dry, like if I'm actually not sealing it, how much time do I have before I can't really manipulate it any further?
So before you can't manipulate the dough, I would say if you just left it out of the bag, by the next day, it's not as pliable as you'd like. So you definitely want to keep it covered and sealed if you want to rework it. And overnight in the exposure would leave it unworkable, in my experience.
Very cool, thank you. And the recipe that you gave us, how much does that make?
It made twice as much as this.
Oh, wow.
So if you think about the volume of a cup of cornstarch and the volume of a cup of glue, it's 2 cups. So it's pretty good.
Okay.
And so the sculptures you're making are basically smaller, the size of your hand. If you wanted to go industrial size, I'm sure you could make a number of batches and make a larger batch. This is why it works very well from home, because although I really like this medium now, I'm trying to wrap my head around how I would do that in the classroom, and it just seems like ordering a box of clay is far easier. And so I might. However, we don't know what we're looking at for the fall. It looks like people are coming back to school, but are they coming back to their options? We don't know that. Are we continuing in this way? It's hard to tell. So I like to have things available for this type of a situation.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Laura. This has been awesome. I know that my kids will be absolutely be building some stuff here in the near future once I can. My wife doesn't let me use our kitchen dishes, so I will be likely to the dollar store for some more disposable kitchen dishes. And we'll be able to go from there. But this has been
pretty good.
Some great ideas here for sure. So thank you so much. And folks, again, if you have any questions, by all means, you can ask them. But this does sort of bring us to the conclusion. There was some questions earlier about the where you're going to be able to find the recording and everything, so you can look back on it. So I'm going to just put something in here. There's a link there that's going to bring you to a new site, and I'm just going to show you just briefly where that is, if for those of you who are still interested in that piece. But that new site will bring you to to the ATAPD resources site. Sorry, bit.ly/ATA. There we go. That's going to bring you to this site right here where we've got all sorts of different tools for you, but specifically if you click on the right where it says upcoming and recorded webinars, what you see currently is right now, this is Sculpting with Cold Porcelain, Fine Arts at Home Teaching. What I'm going to do here this evening is I will add the recording available link, and so once you click on that, you'll be able to get the recording available. Also, once you click in there, you'll be able to see some of the websites that Laura referenced here for you today, so you'll be able to take a look at those as well. As you look through the next couple of weeks, we do have some other great sessions happening in the next couple of weeks. We should be wrapping up most of our PD webinars by the end of next week. So by the end of May, we should be finishing up our webinars. But there's all sorts of different ones you can take a look at for recordings if you would like, and things like that. So thank you for joining us. If there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know for sure. My email is in your chat box, and Laura will Laura, if you want to type your email in the chat box as well for people that.
Sure. There's one more thing I'd like to add. If you like it as much as it seems like you do, because people are saying such lovely things in the comments, I would love to see what you create with this. So if you can take a picture and send it to my email address, I will post it on our website. And here's my email address. It's also listed at the start of our presentation. And I'd love to see that.
Awesome.